Today we're talking about a situation almost every man faces at some point. What to do when a woman starts ignoring you. And more importantly, the 7 mistakes you must avoid at all costs. This topic matters because the moment a woman pulls away, most men panic, overthink, and take actions that actually push her even further. And half the time, you don't even realize you're doing it. Let's be honest, when someone you care about suddenly goes quiet, it hits your pride, your confidence, and your sense of control. It makes you question what went wrong, whether you said something off or whether you're about to lose her. And that pressure leads to reactions that feel natural in the moment, but damage the situation long term. This video is here to help you break that cycle. A woman ignoring you doesn't automatically mean she's done with you. Sometimes she's testing how you handle discomfort. Sometimes she's trying to see your emotional discipline. And sometimes she's simply dealing with her own life and you misinterpret it. But the real problem isn't her silence, it's your response to it. How you act in those moments says more about you than anything she says or doesn't say. As men, we're often taught to chase harder, explain ourselves, fix things immediately, or prove our worth when we feel someone slipping away. But in relationships, that instinct can backfire quickly. When you react emotionally instead of strategically, you shift the power dynamic, lose respect, and send the message that your self-worth depends on her attention. That's exactly what we're going to prevent today. Because the truth is simple. You can't control whether a woman pulls back, but you can control how you respond. And that response is what determines whether the situation improves, stays stuck, or collapses completely. In this video, I'll walk you through the 7 biggest mistakes men make when a woman ignores them, and how avoiding them instantly puts you back in control of yourself, your emotions, and the direction of the connection. 1. Chasing her for attention. Picture this. You've been talking to a woman for a while. Things felt good. Maybe you were texting every day. Maybe the energy seemed balanced. Maybe you even felt like she was starting to warm up to you. Then one day, the replies slow down. The messages get shorter. She takes hours to respond to things she used to answer instantly. Eventually, the silence becomes impossible to ignore. This is the moment where most men make their biggest mistake. They start chasing. It starts subtly. You send a second text because you think she missed the first, then a third text because you don't want to seem rude or distant. You check your phone constantly, rereading the chat, trying to figure out where it all shifted. You might even message her something like, "Hey, is everything okay?" or "Did I do something wrong?" because the uncertainty is eating at you. And while your intentions might be innocent, the message you're sending is not. When a woman pulls back and you immediately rush forward, you're teaching her something. You're teaching her that the moment she withdraws, you will invest more. You're teaching her that your emotional state depends on her attention. And in the early stages of dating or even in a relationship, that creates an imbalance you won't like later. Chasing her for attention often comes from anxiety, not confidence. You feel the discomfort of uncertainty, and you try to fix it instantly. But when you try to force connection during her silence, the energy shifts from attraction to pressure. What could have been a harmless pause suddenly becomes a situation where she feels like she has all the control. Here's the part men overlook. Women notice how you act when you're uncomfortable. Anyone can look confident when everything is going smoothly, but your reaction when she pulls away is what shows who you really are. If you stay centered, she sees strength. If you spiral into over-pursuit, she sees insecurity. Imagine the same scenario, but you handle it differently. She slows down her replies, but you don't react with panic. You don't chase her, double message her, or try to force interaction. Instead, you stay composed. You let the silence breathe. You focus on your day, your goals, your routines. Without saying a word, you communicate something powerful. You value yourself, and you're not dependent on anyone's attention to feel grounded. This is when attraction often resets itself. She realizes you're not falling apart. She sees you're not hanging on her every movement. And that emotional stability is exactly what makes men stand out. Chasing her for attention might feel like the quickest way to pull her back, but it does the opposite. The more you chase, the further she drifts. The more you lean in, the more she leans out. The smartest thing you can do is maintain your composure. Because when you stay calm in her silence, you protect your value, your respect, and your position in the connection. 2. Over-texting and double messaging. When a woman starts ignoring you, the silence feels louder than anything she could have said. And in that silence, a lot of men fall into one of the most damaging habits. They keep texting. Not because they have something meaningful to say, but because they're trying to pull a reaction out of her. It usually starts with a harmless follow-up text, something simple like, "Hey, did you get my message?" But when she still doesn't respond, the anxiety starts creeping in. Before you know it, you're sending another message, maybe something longer this time, hoping to spark some kind of conversation or explanation. The problem isn't the message itself. The problem is what it communicates. When you over-text a woman who's pulling away, you're essentially telling her that your patience, your confidence, and your emotional balance all depend on how quickly she responds. You might think you're showing interest, but what you're actually showing is desperation, something that instantly lowers your value in her eyes. Women can feel when a man is texting from a place of insecurity rather than maturity. Think of it like this. Imagine you sent her a message in the morning. She hasn't replied all afternoon, and now it's evening. Your thoughts start racing. Maybe she's busy, or maybe something's wrong, or maybe she's losing interest. That fear pushes you to send another message, something you hope sounds casual but is clearly coming from worry. What men don't realize is that every extra message shifts the energy more and more into the wrong direction. You're no longer communicating because you want to. You're communicating because you're trying to solve an emotional discomfort within yourself, and women can sense that shift immediately. What you need to understand is that silence is also communication. Her slow replies or lack of response are sending a message, and over-texting doesn't fix whatever the message is. It only amplifies your insecurity. Even if she was simply busy or distracted, the moment she sees 3 unread messages from you instead of 1, the dynamic changes. You go from being a man she was casually getting to know to a man who feels unstable when he doesn't get instant reassurance. Now picture a different response. She goes quiet, and you send your message, just one. After that, you let the conversation breathe. You don't chase. You don't try to force engagement. You respect your own time enough to stay composed. That alone sends a powerful signal. It says you're not the type of man who loses emotional control over texting patterns. It shows discipline. It shows self-respect. And here's what many men overlook. When you give a woman space, it often makes her more curious about you. Your silence becomes more attractive than any message you could have sent. Instead of flooding her phone, you show restraint. Instead of seeking reassurance, you stand firm in your value. Over-texting kills attraction because it exposes your emotional needs. But giving her space strengthens attraction because it shows you don't rely on her responses to feel centered. 3. Apologizing. When you did nothing wrong, one of the most overlooked mistakes men make when a woman ignores them is apologizing just to keep the peace. And here's where things get a bit controversial. A lot of women don't actually want the apology. They want to see how easily you'll bend. Not because they're malicious, but because your reaction tells them exactly where your backbone is. Think about how often this happens. She goes quiet for a day, maybe 2. She gives you short replies or none at all. You start replaying your last conversation in your head, searching for something you might have said that could have upset her. Even if nothing comes to mind, you still feel pressure to fix the situation. So you send a message that sounds like, "Hey, if I did anything wrong, I'm sorry." In your mind, you're being mature. You're being considerate. You're showing emotional intelligence. But in her mind, you just apologize for a crime you didn't commit. Apologizing without a reason is a quiet confession of insecurity. It tells her you're more afraid of losing her than you are committed to your own self-respect. It tells her your priority is pleasing her, even when you don't know what the problem is. And here's the twist. The faster a man apologizes just to restore attention, the faster a woman loses respect for him. Women don't test your words. They test your reactions, silence, distance, mixed signals. Those moments reveal how solid you are internally. If you crumble and rush into apology mode, you're telling her that you can be guilt-tripped without even knowing why. And once she learns that, she can use emotional distance anytime she wants more effort from you. Not intentionally to harm you, but because humans naturally repeat what works. Imagine a different path. She goes cold, and instead of panicking or assuming you did something wrong, you stay calm. You don't apologize for imaginary mistakes. You don't try to repair something that isn't broken. You simply match her pace and let the situation speak for itself. When nothing in your behavior shows panic or guilt, you send a subtle but powerful message. I'm open to communication, but I don't shoulder blame that isn't mine. That's when the dynamic shifts. A woman will notice when you maintain your dignity during her silence, and she'll respect it, because confidence isn't just about being bold when things are good, it's about staying grounded when things feel uncertain. Apologizing when you did nothing wrong might feel like the nice thing to do, but nice isn't the same as strong, and strength is what keeps attraction alive. 4. Trying to make her jealous. When a woman starts ignoring you, it's tempting to react in ways that make her notice you again. One of the most common reactions men fall into is trying to make her jealous. You start posting more, hinting at being out with other women, exaggerating your social life, or showing off online with the hope that she'll see it and suddenly care again, and while it might get her attention, it never gets you respect. Trying to make her jealous is emotional manipulation dressed up as confidence. You may think you're taking control, but what you're really doing is proving that her silence has power over you. If your goal is to look unbothered, doing things solely to trigger her proves the opposite. It shows you're very bothered. Women can sense when your behavior is genuine and when it's driven by insecurity, and nothing kills attraction faster than a man who's performing instead of living. Here's the part men need to understand. If you need to use jealousy to regain her attention, then you've already surrendered your position. A man who truly values himself doesn't try to provoke reactions. He focuses on being the kind of man whose life naturally draws respect. Real confidence doesn't need an audience. Real confidence doesn't need validation from someone who's pulling away. Real confidence is silent, steady, and self-directed. Now let's talk about how men should act instead. The moment she goes distant, your goal is not to get revenge, teach her a lesson, or make her miss you through jealousy. Your goal is to stay grounded and centered in your identity as a man. When you act from a place of strength, you don't need to manipulate her emotions. You simply return your energy back to yourself. You pour into your routine. You focus on your priorities. You show through your actions, not theatrics, that your life doesn't pause because someone stopped texting you. A woman pays more attention to what you do when she isn't watching than what you perform when she is. That means you live your life fully, whether she's responding or not. Go to the gym because it's part of who you are, not because you want her to see it. Go out with friends because you have a life, not because you're trying to spark jealousy. Improve yourself because it's your standard, not because someone is ignoring you. When a woman senses that you're genuinely invested in your life, not performing for her attention, the dynamic shifts. You become the man who doesn't compete, doesn't chase, and doesn't need to play games. You become the man who has options, direction, and discipline. And that type of man naturally demands respect without saying a word. Trying to make her jealous puts her in control. Living your life with purpose puts you back in control. 5. Getting emotional or confrontational. When a woman starts ignoring you, the silence can create a pressure that pushes many men into emotional reactions. Some men get defensive, some get confrontational. Others fall into long, emotional paragraphs trying to express how hurt or confused they are. And while these reactions come from natural human feelings, they almost always make the situation worse. What most men don't realize is that when a woman pulls away, she usually expects one of two things. Either she expects you to lose emotional control, or she expects you to fold into emotional vulnerability too quickly. In her mind, silence often becomes a quiet test of your stability. She wants to see how you handle discomfort, how you cope with uncertainty, and whether pressure makes you crumble or stay centered. She's not necessarily doing this consciously, but emotionally, This is often the expectation. Women notice everything about a man's emotional discipline. They notice the tone of your messages, the speed at which you react, the shift in your energy, and whether your emotions suddenly rise because hers did. When a man instantly gets emotional, confrontational, or frustrated, he unintentionally confirms her expectation that his confidence is fragile and his masculinity is reactive rather than grounded. Imagine a scenario. She hasn't replied for hours, maybe days. You feel ignored, disrespected, or confused. Instead of holding your frame, you send a message that says, "Why are you ignoring me?" Or, "I don't deserve this." Or, "If you don't want me, just say it." To you, this might feel honest or relieving. To her, it communicates something deeper, that you lack emotional stability when you don't get the response you want. This is exactly what women expect many men to do, to react emotionally because they can't handle a moment of uncertainty. But now imagine responding differently. Instead of confronting her or releasing your frustration, you stay composed. You continue your day, you maintain your routine. You don't write long emotional messages or demand explanations. You show calmness in a moment where most men lose their balance. That unexpected response is what stands out. Women expect emotional chaos. They expect a man to chase, to complain, or to pressure them for answers. When you don't fall into that pattern, you create a different kind of impression, one that communicates strength. Not the loud, aggressive type of strength, but the quiet kind that holds firm even when the situation doesn't go your way. When a man shows emotional discipline, everything about the dynamic changes. Instead of pushing her further away, your calmness makes her question her own behavior. Instead of feeling pressured, she starts paying attention again. Instead of seeing you as reactive, she begins to see you as grounded and self-assured, traits that naturally draw a woman closer. A woman may ignore you, but she is always watching how you respond. When you stay calm instead of emotional or confrontational, you show the kind of strength she didn't expect. And that's exactly what shifts the entire situation in your favor. 6. Dropping your standards to keep her. One of the most subtle but damaging mistakes men make when a woman ignores them is lowering their standards just to stay in her life. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, in tiny adjustments you barely notice. Maybe you tolerate behavior you normally wouldn't. Maybe you settle for inconsistent communication. Maybe you let disrespect slide because you're afraid bringing it up will push her further away. What you don't realize is that every time you shrink your standards, you shrink your value. When a woman pulls away, the emotional instinct inside many men tells them, "Don't rock the boat, just agree, be flexible, be understanding." But flexibility becomes weakness the moment you start betraying your own expectations to avoid losing someone. Women notice this immediately. When they sense a man bending in ways he normally wouldn't, the respect begins to fade. Here's where things get especially interesting. When a woman ignores you, she often expects you to start lowering the bar. She expects you to tolerate less attention, less effort, and less consistency just to keep her around. She expects you to start accepting crumbs because you're afraid of losing the whole loaf. And when you act exactly how she expects, you confirm a hidden belief that she can give you less and you'll still stay. But think about the men women actually respect long-term. They're not the ones who accept whatever comes their way. They're the ones who quietly communicate, "If you want access to my time and energy, there's a standard you need to meet." Not in a rude or controlling way, but in a calm, self-respecting way that shows he values himself. Imagine this scenario. She ignores your message for a day or two. When she finally gets back to you, the message is short and barely engaged. Most men would respond instantly, acting overly friendly, pretending the silence didn't bother them, desperate to keep the connection alive. But what if you handled it differently? What if you took your time to reply, not to play games, but because your world doesn't revolve around inconsistent attention? What if your response was calm, normal, but not overly eager? What if you didn't reward low effort with high effort? That's what maintaining your standards looks like. A man with standards doesn't chase someone who's drifting. He doesn't overcompensate when someone underdelivers. He doesn't rearrange his entire emotional world because someone stopped texting him for a while. Instead, he stays rooted in who he is. He chooses the relationships that match his energy, not the ones that force him to lower it. And here's the part men underestimate. When you maintain your standards during her silence, you don't push her away. You pull her curiosity back toward you. Women aren't drawn to men who give in easily. They're drawn to men who respect themselves deeply. Keeping your standards high doesn't make you difficult, it makes you valuable. 7. Waiting around, instead of living your life. When a woman ignores you, the biggest trap a man can fall into is pressing pause on his entire life. You stop focusing, you lose your rhythm, you become distracted, constantly checking your phone, replaying conversations, wondering if she'll ever respond. Hours go by, then days, and you stay stuck in mental limbo. You're technically living, but emotionally you're waiting. Waiting for a text, waiting for clarity, waiting for her attention to return. But here's the truth most men overlook. When you put your life on hold for someone who's silent, you're silently telling yourself that she's more important than your own direction. And nothing drains your confidence faster than that. What makes this mistake dangerous is that it feels harmless. You're not chasing her. You're not over-texting. You're not arguing. You're simply waiting. But that waiting is the real damage, because waiting is passive. Waiting creates anxiety. Waiting puts your emotions in someone else's hands. And waiting makes you forget who you are outside of the situation. Women notice this energy more than men think. Even if she doesn't see your daily routine, she can feel when your life becomes centered around her. She can sense when your world stops moving the moment hers does. And the moment she senses that, the attraction naturally dips. Not because she wants you to ignore her, but because she wants a man who doesn't lose himself just because she stepped away for a moment. Now picture a different response. She goes silent, and instead of waiting, you keep moving. You go to the gym because consistency matters to you. You meet your goals because they're part of who you are. You spend time with friends, dive into projects, take care of your responsibilities, not to make her jealous, not to pretend you're busy, but because your life truly matters to you. That kind of energy is magnetic. A man who keeps living doesn't need to announce that he's confident. His actions already prove it. When she eventually looks back, and women do look back, she sees a man who didn't lose momentum. She sees someone who didn't collapse under pressure. She sees a man committed to his path, not someone frozen in emotional uncertainty. This is the part men underestimate. Women are drawn to motion. They respect men who maintain their direction regardless of setbacks. They admire men who stay grounded in their routines and goals. When you live fully instead of waiting, you show her something she didn't expect, that her silence doesn't define your identity. Even if the situation never fully resolves, you win because you never stopped being yourself. A woman may come and go, but your mission, your purpose, and your direction should never take a break. The moment you keep living your life with purpose, you step into the kind of strength women naturally pay attention to. When a woman ignores you, the real test isn't her silence. It's your response. Every mistake we've discussed comes down to one core truth. A man's value shows most clearly when things feel uncertain. If you avoid chasing, stay composed, protect your standards, and keep living your life with purpose, you come out stronger no matter how the situation ends. The goal isn't to win her back. The goal is to stay grounded in who you are. And when you hold that frame, you naturally attract the right energy back into your life.